All right, our guest today is a professional wrestler who has wrestled for Impact, Ring of Honor, and of course, the WWE. He is a multi-time world champion and world tag team champion, having held 14 total championships. He has spent time behind the mic as well, working as a color commentator and lending his voice to video games like WWE 12, which, by the way, is a very good game to play. He's been vegan since 2011 and has even appeared in PETA videos encouraging the lifestyle. Oh, and by the way, is the self-proclaimed greatest man who ever lived. Please welcome to the Real Men Eat Plants podcast. Yes, it is the one, the only, Austin Aries.
That's quite the introduction. Thank you, Rich. Eric.
Trying to fit it all in there, you know. I don't know if we got it all. You're probably used to that, right? I mean, so yeah, I think you have played face, though. You've been a heel. Which one do you like more? What's more satisfying for you as a wrestler?
Sorry, I missed you just on that last part. What was the question?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so I know you've been a face, you've been a heel. Which one do you like more as a wrestler? Which one's more satisfying for you?
I think I've always enjoyed getting under people's skin, right? And I've always said this is why. In real life, a lot of times, the bad guys win, right? You know, if we look into politics or corporate structure, right, these things, sometimes the people with the worst qualities find their way to the top. And so what for me is really satisfying is I can take a lot of these things, these evils around me, and I can be that, become that, portray that, get under people's skin, make them angry, and then give them the satisfaction at the end of when I get beat, I get pinned. I figure the lower I can take them down here, the higher I can bring them at the end when I finally get my comeuppance, when I get what I deserve. And we don't always get that in real life. So in pro wrestling, I'm able to give that to them. And the first part of that is making them really emotionally invested in disliking me. And the more I can take them down there, the higher I can bring them at the end when I finally get my just due. So I think even in real life, it's always been a little, you know, if you ever tried to make everybody like you, it's exhausting, and it's an impossible feat, you know. And so I think it's always easier just kind of be true to yourself, and you know, you're going to find out who resonates with you. Some people are going to like you, some people aren't, and that's just the way you roll.
You know, I was looking through some of your matches, getting ready for this, and Eric, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
We have both that kind of jumped in at the same time, but I wanted to go into just a little bit of that background. You're from Milwaukee area, and then Roderick Strong also has Wisconsin ties. So was that an intentional thing in that partnership between you two, or did that just work out that way?
No, we just got thrown together with Generation Next, and you know, we just kind of clicked, and then we, you know, formed a tag team. Had some pretty good success with that. Yeah, but no, there was not that was not part of the equation. Yeah, just chance.
Yes, having some of those Wisconsin ties means that some of your fandom, I notice, it's for the Packers and the Bucks and the Brewers, and looking at those teams. I mean, the Packers have a legitimate shot at going to a Super Bowl. The Brewers are definitely playoff contenders and have a shot at a World Series. The Bucks have won a championship and definitely can get back there. Has there ever been a better time to be a sports fan in the state of Wisconsin than right now?
No, it's you know, a lot of success for not being a huge market. It's funny. I talk about in my book. I open the book and I talk about how Wisconsin might be the most, like, you know, cheese loving place in the world. But you think about these three sports teams, right? You got the Packers, who literally wear pieces of cheese on their head to celebrate. You have the Brewers, who have sausage races around the stadium. And then you have the Bucks, who are named after deer that we shoot and put up on our station wagon once a year. So, you know, to come from that environment and find a way into a plant-based lifestyle isn't the norm, because everything around us is anti that if you really look at it.
Yeah, I actually talk about being behind the cheddar curtain where we are, because we're actually broadcasting from Madison, Wisconsin. And so being vegan up here is not the easiest thing in the world. I've only had to do it for a couple of years, but there's a lot of pressure on you to eat cheese and to eat meat, especially in a state like Wisconsin, isn't there?
Absolutely. And that was my transition. It was, I went plant-based in 2000, actually. 2000, the same year I started wrestling. But it was that 10-year transition of lying to myself about dairy and milk and how calcium and protein and the cows don't die and all these things. Because again, that's basically religion in Wisconsin is cheese. So eventually I was able to, come to my senses and get rid of that too.
Expand on that too, because it is sort of not the norm. And then you had that window. You said you were kind of just lying to yourself about what the truth was, and then figuring your way. So did you notice anything in your body and in your just training, the time period where you weren't maybe 100% all in on the vegan thing, or and then once you did 2011, I'm fully vegan, and whatever that time frame looked like, did your body feel any different in that time frame?
Not noticeably, I think, because it was such a gradual transition. I think the most noticeable difference is I pulled up a couple of pictures from my college days before I went on this journey of being a conscious consumer, as I like to say. And some of those pictures in my, eating the college food and the Domino's pizza and spending a lot of nights in the bar, I looked way different. I was skinny fat. I didn't look healthy. My transition into this lifestyle coincided with me beginning my wrestling career, because now I had to really refocus on being an athlete, figure out how to get my body in the condition I needed it in. And so when I started to look and actually try to educate myself about my food choices, that's when I uncovered a lot of these dirty secrets that were not, enlightened to. And then as I kept peeling back these layers and learning more, that transition just continued to snowball. And, I said, there's really no finish line. I'm always questioning the things I think I believe or the new information that's out there. But what I did notice is that I didn't have a hard time putting size on. I probably gained 20 to 25 pounds of muscle once I transitioned. My recovery time has always been really good. Again, I'm in my 40s now. I'm still performing at a high level. I think I still look good for my age. I feel good for my age, all things considered, 22 years of wrestling and wear and tear. But I think that that's all contributed now to this lifestyle I've led for 20 years, right? It's not necessarily something you're going to notice a huge difference immediately, but I think long-term and longevity-wise, it'll definitely pay off.
You talk about your early years as a wrestler, and I want to go back to that, because there had to be a point or a moment where you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm going to do this, because you're an athletic guy, you were playing other sports, but wrestling, wow, I mean, it's tough on the body, it's tough on the mind, it's a lot of grinding that you have to do, and a lot of injuries. What made you go down that path? Now, I'm thinking to myself, back when I was watching wrestling as a kid in the 80s, it was Macho Man, it was Hulk Hogan, it was WrestleMania 3, which I thought was like the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. That made me eventually, I was even doing ring announcing for professional wrestling. I loved it. I loved everything about it. What was it for you? What was it that grabbed you, or was it certain wrestlers that made you say, yep, this is what I want to do?
I grew up a huge wrestling fan. I grew up watching the Crockett promotions, the Horsemen, Dusty, Magnum TA, that time period. Obviously, AWA was pretty popular in the Milwaukee, Midwest area. That was some of the first shows I went to, 5, 6 years old. But the idea of becoming a pro wrestler never really entered my mind because, again, pre-Google and pre-internet, you didn't have the information of how you would even go about that. There wasn't wrestling schools. You couldn't Google wrestling schools and find these things out. And it was still a very protected industry. You had to kind of know somebody to get you in the door. I grew up thinking I was going to be a baseball player. Then I started drinking coffee and doing some recreational drugs at too early of an age and stunted my growth, which then put a cap on the baseball career. So for me, I went to college to play baseball and fizzled out after a couple of years, realizing that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And then I was talking to an old childhood friend who was training in Minneapolis with Eddie Sharkey and Terry Fox. And I knew the name Eddie Sharkey from a lot of the Midwest guys that have come out of there, like the Road Warriors and Rick Rude and Barry Darso and the like. And so I drove up there to check it out because I didn't believe him. Like, what do you mean you're just training to be a wrestler? Like, there's a school? Like, what are you talking about? And yeah, I went there and I saw this ring set up in a garage, and I immediately knew this is what I wanted to do. I was at that age where I was searching for my path in life. What am I supposed to do with my life? And all of a sudden, this kind of smacked me across the face. This opportunity was real. And I think at that age too, ignorance is bliss. You don't think about the journey. You don't think about all the sacrifice. You just kind of dive in head first because you're like, oh, I have something that I want to do, and it's a possibility. I moved up on my buddy's couch a week later. Gave half of the $500 I had in my account to my down payment to start training. Started giving plasma twice a week to make some money, doing odd jobs, and do whatever I had to do to pay my dues. There was no GoFundMe. I couldn't put up a GoFundMe account on my Instagram or whatever. So, but the idea of not accomplishing this never crossed my mind because it all was right in front of me. I just had to put the work in and just put the time in, and I knew that I had the tools, and it was just a matter of continuing to dedicate myself to that journey. And I think part of that too is when you're enjoying the journeys and you're not just focused on the finish line or the result, that's the key to success. I think sometimes we get so fixated on where we're trying to get to, we don't enjoy the process of getting there. And that to me is where the real value is.
I think people, like you said, kind of get locked into that journey, that destination of what they're trying to do. And, you've been fortunate to have, these avenues. And, I think that's, a testament to, where this sport, this industry has come from and where it's going. And I'm curious too, because, being on the road as much as you are and just the diet change to being a vegan, are there a lot of wrestlers who live that same lifestyle, or is that something that's kind of, is that still on the rise?
Yeah, it's still fringe. I mean, there's more now today than there was when I started, 20 years ago on this path. And, I still think though it's still a very much of a kind of meathead bodybuilder mentality, right? Because we're all trying to be body guys and keep muscle on, and that conventional wisdom says that you need to eat that flesh to build muscle. Even though I always asked, people say, where do you get your protein? I said, well, where does the cow get its protein? And they go, well, grass. I said, well, I just cut out the middleman and just go to the source, So it all comes from the sun to plants, and then from there it gets utilized. So, I mean, it's, I've seen it transition over the years. Obviously, it's easier now than ever to follow a plant-based diet. But for me, it's always just been, again, where do you put your priorities? Where do you put your resources, your time, your money, your energy? And so, I put a little extra bit of my resources towards these things. So I'm always prepared. Whenever I travel, I travel with my cooler. I always have, whether it's pre-cooked lentils or bars or fruit, like I always have something with me no matter where I go, because airline food's garbage. 2, convenience store food's garbage. Anything after a show at midnight or 1 a.m. is going to be garbage. So why do I want to put myself in a position to have to feel like I'm forced to pay for these subpar foods when I can just, prepare a little bit ahead of time, bring a few things that I can always have with me. So no matter where I'm at, I've got some food available. If the guys want to go to the steakhouse, that's fine. I bring my packet of beluga lentils and I dump it in the spinach salad, and I can hang out with everybody and eat just the same.
Yeah, and you do have to plan ahead. I tell you what, that's one thing I've learned about being plant-based and vegan. If you don't plan ahead, sometimes you're not eating. It's basically, what
but
it is.
Rich, the reality is even if it's not plant-based, if you're just trying to eat quality food, if you don't plan ahead, because the unfortunate reality is 90% of everything you're going to find in a grocery store, in a convenience store, or fast food is garbage. It's not good for you. So if you're trying to be conscious about what you eat, whether that's plant-based or not, you kind of have to take that into your own hands. And again, my book isn't about trying to make people go vegan. It's about becoming a conscious consumer and realizing the most powerful vote we have is with our pocketbook. It's with our dollar, where we spend it, right? So I don't care about going to the voting polls. I do care about not supporting things I don't believe in or that aren't good for me. And there's a power in that. Once you decide to educate yourself, there's a real power in understanding as a consumer. I hold the keys. Nobody forces me to buy these things. Yes, they market to me. Yes, they try to sell it to me, and they have, inordinate amounts of money to do that. But ultimately, it's my decision to put it in my shopping cart and purchase it, or put it in my mouth. We are what we become what we consume, whether that's what we eat and drink, what we watch, what we listen to, who we listen to. And I think a lot of us just kind of walk through life on autopilot, thinking that completely unconscious to this reality, and then expecting these people or corporations who aren't beholden to us, right? We're trusting them with our health and our well-being. For what reason, I'm not quite sure, because these people have never been shown to be trustworthy or caring when it comes to the consumer.
No, and I know, you hit on something that's, and I don't know if you dove into my, history a little bit. So I'm coaching track and field. I work with high school athletes, and one of the things that I try to teach the kids too is that diet is not just the things that you eat, and you hit that right on the head. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But I also want to give you a second to talk about anything else that's in that book that you feel is worthwhile. I'm sure there's some other stories in there from your wrestling, your past and present.
Yeah, I mean, it really just it kind of chronicles my upbringing in a Midwest upbringing, lower middle class family, eating all the regular foods that all of us that grew up in the 80s were eating, and how I just thought that was normal. I never really thought much beyond that. And then it just talks about these seeds that were planted along the way that eventually sprouted and led me down this journey. One was at an early age. My grandparents had a farm, so when I grew up, visiting out there, and I remember one day feeding grass to the cow through the fence and having this moment, right? This two living creatures looking in each other's eyes. I'm feeding this cow, and I thought to myself, I wonder what it's thinking right now. Like, it's obviously looking at me. We're having this connection. What is it thinking? What is it feeling? And that was the actual light bulb of oh, it is thinking, it is feeling, right? It's not just some object. So we have this moment of this, this interaction between two sentient beings. And then it was, hey, dinner's ready. And we're eating hamburgers and sausages, Italian sausages. And I made the connection. And it was off-putting. It didn't feel right to me. But at that age, if you want dessert, you eat what's on your plate, right? I mean, it's just that simple. But that was a seed that was planted that always stuck in the back of my head, And so it just really talks about my journey, and then how the question of, hey, red meat and pork isn't good for you, and how I wanted to kind of, I wanted to debunk that. So let me go do this research so I can tell this guy he's wrong, and then realizing he wasn't wrong. And not only wasn't he wrong about that, but as I kept learning more and more and more, I realized not only is red meat and pork not good for me, but literally everything I've grown up eating and that they advertised to me is not good for me. And that completely changed my worldview, right? Not just about diet, but just how I view the world and how much trust and faith I put into what I'm told by the powers that be. Because when you realize that they've been lying to you and misleading you, and that they profit off of sickness and stupidity, they don't profit off of healthy, intelligent people in this system. They profit off of sick and stupid people. So everything is designed to keep you ignorant and keep you sick as much as they can, because that's their customer base. We don't want to prevent disease. We don't want to cure disease because we lose a customer. We treat disease. But before we can treat disease, we have to give you disease. Well, let me start with cow's milk at an early age. Let me start with kids cereal, which is anti-nutritional garbage that we give a whole aisle to in the shopping market, right? 3 kinds of sugar, GMO corn and wheat, and we call that's a good way to start the day. It's all bullshit, excuse my language. You can bleep me out if you need to.
Language is allowed here. It's okay.
And so my book... Okay, well, I try to be, PG-14. But
We're
so
good.
My book talks about this revelation and realization of the system that I'm living in, and how it's set up for me to fail, and that it was up to me to hack the system by educating myself. And there's a reason that Kellogg's and Nestle and all these companies spend all this amount of money to figure out how to market to you and to trap you into the products, because once you get smart to the game and you detach from them, they never get my money again. McDonald's will never get another penny from me, right? Coca-Cola, will never get another penny from me. I'm smart to the game. I'm no longer someone that they're going to profit from, right? And so that's why so much money and time is spent to keep us ignorant to this, because once you get smart to it and you see the facade and you detach from it, you're free from it. And now you live a healthy, happy life. I don't worry about pharmaceutical drugs. I don't worry about my health insurance premiums. I don't play into this game, right? And there's a whole nother system set up. And so my book just kind of talks about that and how that journey coincided with my wrestling career and how I felt that the two really were integrated in my success, where taking this knowledge now of food and being healthy was a key component for my success for the last 20 years.
Yeah. And, I'm so glad that you bring up, how people are kind of programmed and taught, because my wife teaches 4K. And so the teacher that she was teaching with one day, that they're handing out milk to the kids, and a lot of the kids don't want to drink it, which I think is just kind of a natural inclination that they don't. But the one teacher's telling them, drink your milk, kids, it's good for you. And my wife took her aside and said, maybe you should do a little research on this, because you might not want to tell the kids that it's good for you. And when that teacher actually did some research, she came back the next day and said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say that anymore. I'm really not going to push this on kids. But the government program's in place. You have to serve that milk to the kids. That's a fact. I mean, it's crazy.
We're paying for this milk to be cheap. We're not consuming it anymore. They're literally dumping this out, but they're still taking our tax money to subsidize it. And it just, I always go back to this. Like when I go and speak on this topic, right, I try to always go back to just common sense, the law of nature. And so milk is designed for babies, right? If you look at every species on the planet, milk is specifically designed for babies until they can eat their species-specific diet. We're the only species that thinks it's somehow good to continue consuming milk after we're babies. But hold on, not even our milk that's been formulated for us. We drink another species milk completely. And there's nowhere else in nature where we see this happening. We don't see adult giraffes going and snacking on rhinoceros milk to wash down some leaves. We just don't see it. Nor if we need a blood transfusion, I'm certainly not going to go get a blood transfusion with cow's blood, because it would make no sense. So now we consume this human growth formula for baby cows to become huge, baby calves to become huge cows. We consume this on a daily basis under the pretense it's good for us. And then we wonder why everyone's obese and has cancer. Well, it's a growth hormone. It grows things, and it's growing things you probably don't want it to grow, because if you're constantly filling yourself with toxic food, toxic news, toxic, things you're listening to and reading, well, guess what? It's going to grow. It's going to grow that toxicity, right? And so, just from a common sense standpoint, I don't need to be a doctor or a scientist to understand that this doesn't make any sense in the law of nature.
Austin, I do have a bone.
Absolutely not.
Because how is it growth hormone and I'm 5'9", 160? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, but think about it. When did you stop consuming milk? How long ago?
I am not 100% plant based, so I'm kind of in that mode. But
right, yeah.
We're trying to get him there, I actually stopped. Yeah, I stopped a couple of years ago. I couldn't believe the difference. And dairy was one thing I really thought that I'd have a hard time giving up cheeses. And I tell you what, as soon as I gave it up, there was absolutely zero urge in my body to have it. And I realized, oh, that's the natural feeling I should be feeling. I'm not supposed to be inclined to drink milk.
And that's the whole thing is, most of us don't have a baseline to compare it to, because we've been consuming these things since before we were even walking, right? So I always equate it to if you came out of the womb and at a year old you started smoking cigarettes, you would never know what it feels like to run around the block without having cigarette lung, because you've never experienced it. So we think that we walk around with being lethargic and having stomach discomfort. That's just the way it is. We also think it's normal that the cancer rate's gone from 0.5% of the population 100 years ago to almost 40% of the population now, and nobody blinks an eye and just goes, oh, that's just the way it is. No, that's not the way it is. There's something causing this, and there's probably multiple things that are causing this. But if we want to keep pretending that our decisions aren't to blame for our issues, we're never going to solve them. So the dairy thing, you know, I always say too, if anyone ever went from drinking whole milk to then 2% milk to then skim milk, and then you go back and try to drink whole milk again, it's disgusting. They can't do it. Well, it's the same thing when you cut dairy out altogether and you go back to drink it later on, you're going to realize it doesn't taste very good anymore. Your taste buds have adapted. You know, it probably didn't taste very good the first few times you drank it, but you were so young you couldn't say anything about it, you know?
You know, another thing too, in consuming animals, one of the things that it does, it creates these zoonotic diseases, and one zoonotic disease is COVID-19. So basically, it's diseases that come from animals, animal agriculture, producing and eating, the consumption of animals, and yet nobody seems to want to stop. I mean, seriously, over 70% of all new diseases are zoonotic diseases that come from animals, and yet we can't put the two together and say, you know what, maybe if we stop all this, that will get way less disease.
Well, let's not discount the level 4 biolabs that some of these things might be coming from too, Rich.
Right, too. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry.
No.
Don't want to go down that.
Well, I'm
not here to talk about that, but yeah.
I was going to try to broach that, you know, in a little finesse. I know you had some controversy on Twitter with it all, and
yeah, no, I don't see the world.
Yeah,
to see it. You know, I'm a.
We don't need to go there. So what now for Austin Aries? And I'll get back to the book in just a second. But what now? What are you doing now? Are you back into wrestling? What's going on with you currently?
I'm still wrestling. You know, I'm actually heading to North Carolina this weekend for the Control Your Narrative company that I'm working with. And you know, we just announced we got a 24 show in city tour coming up starting in October. So that's going to be a big undertaking. And you know, I'm helping obviously you know, with in-ring competition, but then also helping in the back with some things and you know, wearing a few different hats there. And yeah, and just enjoying life and trying to figure out, you know, I've got probably more behind me than in front of me as far as the wrestling career goes. So I'm trying to figure out what the next evolution is, you know, putting together right now, you know, life coaching program to help people, you know, just improve their overall life, whether that's through their diet, through exercise, through different, you know, techniques of mindfulness, breath work, meditation, which I find to be very helpful. You know, so I'm just trying to figure these things out. You know, I think that you know, the more we can share with one another, especially people who are successful or looked at as being successful, if we're able to be vulnerable and transparent and share that we still struggle or we're still working on things, we're still trying to improve, we don't have it all figured out. Nobody ever has the puzzle figured out. You know, we do figure out how to stop jamming the wrong pieces in the wrong places, but the puzzle's never complete, right, in life. There's always going to be things to continue to do. So I'm still enjoying the wrestling for now, but I'm also looking at, you know, how I'm going to transition and what the next 20 years might look like.
Awesome. And it definitely, you're a contemplative guy. You definitely are looking at life and trying to figure out. And I think a lot of your journey is the same journey and the same kind of information that I got. And I just couldn't leave it alone after a certain point. It's like, I got to follow this. I didn't want to do it. I liked the taste of meat actually at one point, but I realized, I mean, what it was doing to me and what it did to me health-wise. And it was absolutely the wrong path for me. The name of the book, Food Fight, My Plant-Based Journey from the Bingo Halls to the Big Time. Austin Aries is the writer. You can find it on Amazon and anywhere else that you can buy a book. And Austin, I'm expecting a signed copy somewhere along the way here too, because I'd love to read it myself because it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and actually, let me direct people not to Amazon, but let me direct them to Pro Wrestling Tees. I got a Pro Wrestling Tees store, and it's best to order. Yeah, best to order the copy from there. The ones on Amazon, I think someone is reselling those, and I think someone said they saw one on there listed for like $90 or something. Please do not spend $90 on my book. While I would Get it from
Wow.
Pro Wrestling Tees. That's the best place to buy it.
Excellent. So good stuff to know. Austin, you've been an absolute delight. We'd love to have you back on later and see how your career is progressing. And we thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here, man. Good stuff.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks a lot, Austin. Hey, you come through with